There are things we think only happen in movies, until the day we witness a soldier rushing through the arrivals gate towards the daughter of a millionaire. And what follows freezes the entire airport. If you enjoy a good story, come sit with me on the porch, hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you, my dear, sounds like fiction, but it's real life. It was a sweltering December morning, the kind where the sky feels like it's pressing down on your shoulders. The airport's air conditioning was trying its best to pretend life was cool inside, but all it took was a glance into the eyes of those waiting for flights to see that the real heat came from elsewhere. And in that setting, amidst rolling suitcases, crying children, and garbled loudspeaker announcements, he appeared. A man in a military uniform, drenched in sweat, panting like he'd run halfway across the world. He ignored security, shoved past a lady holding a bouquet, and knocked over a small sign that read, Dr. Fabio. His eyes were locked on something in the distance, as if the whole world had turned into a blurry background for a mission he couldn't delay. On the other side stood a young woman, elegantly dressed, holding a backpack with the emblem of a bilingual school. She was distracted, typing on her phone, until a voice rang out, Clara! Her head lifted slowly, as if she couldn't believe she'd heard her own name. And when her eyes met that soldier's, time stopped. But not in a beautiful way. It stopped in a strange way, because she didn't smile, she didn't run, she didn't cry. She froze. And witnesses say it was at that exact moment the millionaire, her father, stood up from his chair, eyes narrowed and mouth dry, as if the past had risen from the dead to claim what was his. A security guard tried to stop the soldier, but he shouted, I just want to see her, please, just 1 minute. The millionaire approached with firm steps, but his face said something else. It said fear. It said anger. It said something old and buried was about to be unearthed. And when he stood face to face with the soldier, he spoke with a chilling calmness. You shouldn't be here. The soldier took a deep breath. His lips trembled, and he replied, She has the right to know. That's when Clara looked at them both and said the sentence that still echoes through the walls of that terminal. What are you hiding from me? The silence that followed was louder than any engine roar that ever shook that place. A silence that screamed. A silence that weighed heavy. And that's when, my dear, the real story began, because what that man revealed next made people lose their footing. I've seen fathers lie to protect their children, but I've also seen fathers lie to protect themselves. And a lie like that doesn't fade with time, it rots. And one day the stench rises, and it reeks of truth. It was a humid December morning, one of those days when the sky seems too heavy to hold. The air conditioning at the airport did its best to fake a sense of coolness inside, but one look into the eyes of those waiting at the gate showed that the real heat was coming from somewhere else entirely. Amid rolling suitcases, crying children, and confusing speaker announcements, he appeared. A man in a military uniform, drenched in sweat, gasping for air like he'd sprinted halfway across the planet. He brushed past security, shoved a woman holding a bouquet, and knocked over a little sign that read, Dr. Fabio. His eyes were locked onto something, or someone, ahead, as if the entire airport were a blurry background for one urgent mission. On the other side, a young woman dressed elegantly stood distracted, clutching a backpack with a bilingual school emblem. She was texting, unaware, until she heard it. Clara! Her head lifted slowly, like someone unsure if she had heard her own name, and when her eyes met the soldier's, time stopped. But not in a storybook way. It stopped in a strange, charged way, because she didn't smile, didn't run, didn't cry. She froze, and people watching say that's when the millionaire, her father, stood from his chair, his eyes narrowed, his lips dry, as if the past had returned to reclaim what belonged to it. A security guard tried to intercept the soldier. I just want to see her. Please, just a minute, the soldier pleaded. The millionaire stepped forward. His strides were firm, but his face, it showed something else. Fear, rage. the buried remains of a truth clawing its way to the surface. When the two men stood face to face, the millionaire spoke with a voice that could freeze bone. "You shouldn't be here." The soldier took a deep breath. His lips trembled. "She has the right to know." And then Clara spoke. Her voice cracked open the silence like thunder. "What are you hiding from me?" Everything fell silent. Even the turbines in the distance seemed to stop spinning. And that, my dear, was the moment everything truly began. Because what was about to be revealed would shake more than just one life. It would collapse a kingdom built on lies. Cesar Toledo, the millionaire, was a name that commanded respect, owner of half the city, a logistics magnate, the kind of man who lived more at airports than at home. He was seen as rigid, demanding, but protective of his daughter. Ever since Clara's mother died, he'd become her whole world, or so everyone thought. But there in that terminal, his eyes held no warmth, only panic, the kind of panic only the past can cause, especially when it shows up wearing a uniform. "You have no right," he growled at the soldier through clenched teeth. "And you do?" the soldier snapped back, glancing at Clara. "She's not your property." Clara clutched the strap of her backpack like an anchor in a sea of chaos. People were recording with their phones now, thinking it was a tearful reunion from a war documentary. But this wasn't a feel-good drama. This was real. And real doesn't come with background music. The airport security stepped in. "Gentlemen, please, no arguments here. We'll have to call the police." Cesar turned coldly to the guard. "Do it. Call them. But get this man away from my daughter." But Clara's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "He's not going anywhere. Not until he tells me what's going on." The soldier's eyes filled with tears. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in a damp cloth, a photograph, old, yellowed, heavy with history. He handed it to Clara with a trembling hand. She unfolded it slowly. What she saw made her knees wobble. A young woman holding a baby. The soldier stood beside them, younger, holding the woman's hand. And the baby wore a tiny gold heart-shaped earring, the exact same one Clara wore to this day. "This was taken in 2005 at the southern base," the soldier whispered. "Her name was Elisa." Clara turned to Cesar, tears building in her eyes. "Who is this woman?" Cesar lowered his head. The soldier answered, "She was your mother, your real mother." Silence. The kind of silence that collapses lungs and makes the floor vanish. Clara let go of her backpack. It hit the ground with a flat thud. Nothing made sense anymore, and it was only the beginning. "But her father died in an accident. You told me that yourself, Cesar," shouted a woman nearby, maybe a family friend who had overheard. "He did die. To me," Cesar replied without looking at anyone. Clara turned to the soldier, her voice almost breaking. "Are you saying you're my father?" He didn't answer out loud. He simply nodded, and the look in his eyes said everything. But before Clara could respond, Cesar raised his voice as if challenging fate itself. "It's not that simple. There's more to this than any of you can imagine." And he walked away, leaving Clara frozen, and the soldier standing there unsure whether to run after his daughter or the years he had lost. But oh, my child, what Cesar had hidden went far beyond switched identities. It was about money, power, and a decision he made nearly 20 years ago that had now come back to collect. And you know how the past works. It charges interest and never gives warning. They say truth sets you free, but they never mention the price, because sometimes the truth breaks you. And when it does, there's no glue in the world that can put you back together. Clara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat on the cold floor of the airport, holding that photo, heart thundering like a storm. The security guards still didn't know if this was a legal matter, a family drama, or a tragic soap opera. The soldier knelt beside her. "I'm sorry, Clara. I waited too long, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. Seeing you from across the terminal, not knowing who I was, killed me inside." She looked up at him slowly, like someone waking from a nightmare that was still happening. "You are my father." He hesitated, breathed deep, met her eyes. I was kept from being. Cesar was already gone, vanished into the terminal, but his last words echoed, "It's not that simple." And it wasn't, because nearly 2 decades earlier, when Elisa, Clara's real mother, died during a complicated birth, the hospital registered the baby as an orphan. The father, the soldier, was away on a mission. It took him 2 days to receive the news. By the time he returned, Clara was gone, taken by Cesar Toledo, not out of generosity, but out of debt. The soldier's name was Rafael. Back in the day, he worked for Cesar's logistics company, an honest man, but one who knew too much, secrets that could destroy reputations. Cesar knew Elisa was pregnant, knew Rafael was the father, knew the pregnancy was not wanted by him, and he also knew that Rafael had documents, evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud involving a humanitarian cargo operation overseas, a scheme disguised as aid. "He called me to the boardroom one Sunday night," Rafael said, voice thick. "Told me Elisa had died, that the baby was vulnerable. He offered her a princess life, education, comfort, a home. But in exchange—" Clara's eyes widened. "In exchange?" she asked breathlessly. "In exchange, that I disappear, that I give up custody, that I hand over the papers I had." The silence between them was enough to split the soul. "And you accepted that?" Rafael bowed his head, eyes clenched shut. "I was young, angry, afraid, and guilty. I had gone off on a mission, left Elisa alone. When I came back, she was buried. Clara was in his hands. I thought it was best for you." Clara stood stumbling slightly, as if trying to balance a world that had just collapsed. "You sold the right to be my father. For silence, for documents." "It wasn't like that. I thought I was protecting you. But later, I realized I'd made a mistake. That's why I'm here now. Because something worse is coming. And you need to know, before it's too late." She stared deep into his eyes. "Worse than stealing my past?" He didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wrinkled envelope. Inside, a printed page with a digital signature. Clara Toledo, official heir to 17 million reais from a company under international criminal investigation. She read the paper slowly, and when she realized what it meant, her hand trembled. "What is this?" Rafael replied, voice low but certain. "It's the reason he kept you close all these years. You were the perfect piece, the ideal daughter, the emotional alibi. And now you're the shield, because if he falls, he'll take you with him." And just then, the airport intercom buzzed. "Passenger Clara Toledo, please report to immigration." But waiting for her wasn't customs. It was a lawyer, wearing a grey suit, holding a summons. And the truth, my dear, was just beginning to hurt. Clara walked through the corridor toward the immigration sector, as if crossing a minefield. Her head pounded. Her steps felt like weights. And Raphael's envelope burned in her hand like it held fire. The tiny gold heart earring swayed softly on her ear, a cruel reminder that nothing about her life was child's play anymore. At the glass door, a woman waited. Grey suit, icy posture, hair pulled tight into a bun. She didn't look like someone who made requests, only demands. "Clara Toledo?" she asked in a tone that left no room for uncertainty. "That's me." The woman held out the summons between 2 fingers, as if handing her poison. "You are being called to provide testimony regarding suspicious financial transactions registered in your name, linked to the company owned by Cesar Toledo." Clara swallowed hard. But I don't even work for the company. You've been listed as a partner with full administrative power since the age of 18. The signature on the document was real. The stamp, official. But what hurt the most was the coldness with which it was all delivered, colder than any love Cesar had ever shown. Rafael stood a few steps behind, watching, helpless, like a man witnessing his daughter sink into a sea he helped fill. Clara didn't cry, not there, but her wet eyes betrayed a storm inside. "This must be a mistake," she tried to argue. The lawyer shook her head with a smile fit for a funeral. I hope so, but your name appears in documents that moved money across 3 countries. Clara felt her stomach drop. Suddenly an image flashed in her mind, her reflection in the airport bathroom mirror just hours before. Perfect mascara, aligned hair, a young woman ready to meet her father after a trip. Now, she was someone else entirely. A woman watching her world collapse, with one father who wasn't, another who had sold his silence, and an inheritance that could mean prison. Out of nowhere, Raphael stepped forward and said to the lawyer, "She's innocent. I can prove she had no idea." The woman glanced at him like one would look at a bug. "And you are?" "I'm her biological father." "Then you have as much emotional involvement as Mr. Cesar. You'll be called to testify as well. The federal authorities will be very interested in your version." Clara took the document from the woman's hand and signed it, her fingers shaking. She wanted to fix it, to understand, to run away. But before leaving the room, she turned to Raphael. You knew what he was doing. Why show up only now?" He hesitated. His eyes were pools of guilt. "Because now, I found something that changes everything. And if you'll let me explain, maybe it's not too late." She froze, her mind spinning, her heart shredded. "What did you find?" she whispered. He opened his wallet and pulled out an old, yellowed letter, handwritten by Elisa. "Your mother left this with me before she died. I never gave it to you. But in it, she explains who she really was and why you could never be left with Cesar." Clara took the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was delicate, familiar, even though she had never seen it. "Why couldn't I stay with him?" she asked. Raphael looked at her deeply and said, "Because he didn't save you from death. He bought your life, and that cost your mother's body." Time stopped. The sentence hovered in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. But it would. Some things we hear, and our body simply refuses to accept. They don't fit, don't sink in, because the heart, poor thing, tries to protect the soul from what the mind has already understood, but cannot bear to believe. Clara held her mother's letter like a message from the grave. The paper was old and stained, but the words felt fresh, written in ink of sorrow, urgency, and a fear that spanned decades. Outside the immigration room, the airport continued its routine of arrivals, departures, and announcements nobody paid attention to anymore. But in that stifled corner of the terminal, a young woman was realizing her entire life may have been built atop a corpse, the corpse of truth. She began reading aloud, voice shaking. "If you ever find this letter, my daughter, it's because life didn't give me enough time, and if it didn't, it's because that man won." Clara paused. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Raphael clenched his fists. It was as though each word wounded him all over again. She continued, "I trusted the wrong man. I thought Cesar wanted to help, but he didn't want to save anyone. He wanted to silence me. He wanted to take you from me. And when he realized I wouldn't agree, he made an offer. Money. A lot of money, so I'd disappear. I refused. And that's when it happened." Clara looked up. "What does she mean? What happened?" Raphael took a deep breath. She began receiving threats, notes at her door, phone calls in the middle of the night. One day, someone broke into her apartment. She was 8 months pregnant. They beat her. She fell. She lost a lot of blood. Clara turned pale. "She died like that?" "Not immediately. She was taken to the hospital, and that's when Cesar stepped in, showed up as a family friend, said he'd cover the costs, said he'd help save the baby, but only if she signed over custody. She was dying and thought signing would save you." Clara squeezed her eyes shut, as if trying to wake from a nightmare. "But she didn't die in childbirth?" Raphael shook his head. His voice broke. "No, she died 2 days later, alone, sedated. They never let anyone see her body. Not even me. I only received the death certificate." Clara stepped back. "You're telling me the man I called father my entire life may have killed my mother?" Raphael didn't answer immediately. He looked her in the eyes. I'm telling you, your mother died trying to protect you, and the man we should have hated became the hero of your childhood." Clara collapsed into the chair. Her legs gave out. Her whole body trembled. It was too much to carry all at once. But Raphael didn't stop. He pulled out another envelope. "In here are messages she sent me, old cell phone screenshots, notes she hid inside books. I found them years later, and more. Documents proving Cesar transferred millions to a private clinic on the very day your mother died." Clara hugged the envelope tightly to her chest, like she was trying to hold together a heart that had always been cracked. "Look, why now? Why are you only showing up now?" Raphael lowered his head. "Because he's going to use you, Clara. He already started. Your name is on international contracts. You could go to prison. And if that happens, he'll vanish, and you'll take the fall for everything." Just then, the intercom buzzed again. "Final call for Flight 507 to Zurich. Passenger Clara Toledo, proceed to Gate 9. But she wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Clara stood up, her eyes still wet, but something had awakened inside. "I'm going to find out everything. I'll uncover what he did, and if it's true, I swear I'll tear down every brick of that filthy empire." Raphael nodded slowly. "Then be ready, daughter, because when you dig up the truth, you might end up buried with it." And the scariest part, he wasn't exaggerating. The office was cold, not just from the air conditioning, but from the tone, the silence, the furniture made of polished steel and emotionless glass. Clara sat in front of the executive who managed her father's finances abroad, a woman with a sharp look, nails like daggers, and a smile that never reached her eyes. "Miss Toledo," the woman said, barely hiding her disapproval, "are you aware that your name is linked to at least 3 offshore accounts in Zurich?" Clara shook her head. "I don't even know what an offshore account really is." The woman clicked her tongue softly, as if that ignorance irritated her. "Then perhaps you'll explain why this document, signed digitally by you, authorized the transfer of $1.2 million last year to an anonymous fund in Cyprus?" She pushed the tablet across the desk. Clara read it, stunned. Her signature was there. It was hers, but she had never seen that document before in her life. "This is forgery," she whispered. "Or naivety," the executive countered. "It's quite common for young heirs to allow family members to handle digital documents for convenience. Many don't even read them." Clara felt her chest tighten. "Are you saying my father forged my signature?" "I'm saying someone used your digital identity for financial maneuvers. And if the Swiss authorities discover that, they won't ask if you were naive. They'll arrest you." Clara leaned back in the chair. Everything inside her screamed, and yet, outside she remained still, like a statue sculpted by fear. The woman continued, "I suggest you speak with your family's legal team. Or better, get your own." That sentence echoed like a bullet through Clara's mind. Get your own. For the first time she understood, truly understood, that no one would protect her. Not Cesar, not his lawyers, not the powerful name on her passport. She was alone. And if she didn't act quickly, she would drown in a sea of crimes she didn't commit. When she left the office, Raphael was waiting on the sidewalk. He lit a cigarette, nervous. Clara didn't even speak. She simply handed him the tablet with the digital signature. He read it in silence. "They're setting you up," he said. She looked at him with fury in her eyes. "No, they already did." And then she whispered something only she could hear. "If I'm going down, I'm taking him with me." Back at the apartment Raphael had rented in Zurich, Clara couldn't sleep. Her heart beat as if trying to escape her chest. She had Elisa's old phone in her hand, a relic Raphael had kept all these years. The device didn't even support modern apps anymore, but it had something no one had ever heard, a voice recording, her mother's voice. She hit play. "My daughter, if one day you listen to this, it's because I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it's because love wasn't enough to protect you. You're so small now, but I hope you grow up to be strong. Stronger than I was, stronger than the fear that paralyzed me." Clara closed her eyes. Elisa's voice was soft, broken, but clear. "I was warned to disappear. They offered me money to vanish, But I couldn't leave you with him. Cesar only wants control, not love. And if he ever gives you a gift, a house, a scholarship, question it, because everything that comes from him has a price. Tears streamed down Clara's face. The audio continued. I don't know if Raphael will be brave enough to stay. Maybe not. But I hope that one day you'll look at yourself in the mirror and know that none of this was your fault. Clara couldn't take it. She paused the recording. Her body trembled. Raphael entered quietly and saw the device in her hands. You found it, he murmured. She recorded this before dying? Days before, she had a feeling that something terrible was coming. Clara stared at him, voice low. Dee, why didn't you give me this years ago? Raphael sat beside her. Because I was ashamed, I ran, I abandoned you, and I thought maybe letting Cesar raise you would give you a better life. Clara laughed bitterly. A better life? I was raised in a golden cage, with lies for breakfast and silence for dinner. They sat in silence, until Raphael said, There's more. Photos, receipts, files she managed to gather before dying. She suspected Cesar was laundering money through fake charities. In your name. Clara clenched her jaw. Then I need to expose it all. Show the world who Cesar Toledo really is. Raphael hesitated. If you do that, your life will never be the same. You'll become a target. He has power in several countries. He knows judges, prosecutors, politicians. I don't care. And she meant it, because when you hear your dead mother's voice begging for justice, fear becomes a luxury. The Swiss morning was cold and grey when Clara and Raphael arrived at the Brazilian embassy. She wore a discreet coat, sunglasses, and a scarf that partially hid her face. She didn't want to be recognized, not because of shame, but because, for the first time, she was preparing for war. Inside the embassy, a lawyer hired by Raphael was waiting. Her name was Helena Salles. She was young, competent, and fearless, someone who had already taken down corrupt ministers in Brasilia. Clara, Helena said firmly, I've reviewed the documents. If even half of this is true, your father could be arrested in 3 countries, but what? You're implicated in all of it, legally. You were the official beneficiary of the operations. The companies are in your name. The money passed through your accounts. Even if it was without your knowledge, it makes things very complicated. Clara looked at Raphael, then at Helena. Then what do we do? Helena opened a folder. We set a trap, but it has to be done with precision. One wrong move and we're the ones who fall. She pulled out a document. Here's the plan. Cesar is attending an event in Geneva tonight, a charity gala at the Hotel d'Angleterre. There, he's going to make a big public donation using your name again. We're going to confront him in public, with press cameras, with microphones, and with the evidence. He'll deny everything, Clara said. Of course he will, Helena replied. But we'll be broadcasting it live, and we'll have the Swiss justice system watching. If we can link him to the fraud in real time, the law will act. Raphael crossed his arms. And if he doesn't go to the gala? Helena looked him in the eye. He will. Narcissists like him can't resist the spotlight. Clara nodded. For the first time, she felt a fire burn inside. Not fear, not pain, but courage. A storm was coming. And this time, she wouldn't hide from it. The ballroom was luxurious. Crystal chandeliers, golden cutlery, champagne glasses bubbling like secrets ready to explode. Billionaires, diplomats, and celebrities filled the room, and in the center of it all, Cesar Toledo, in a tuxedo, smiling like someone who believed himself untouchable. Clara entered slowly, accompanied by Helena and Raphael. The cameras turned to her instantly. She didn't flinch. The host of the gala announced, and now the generous donation from Miss Clara Toledo, who, inspired by her father, will invest 4 million francs in orphan support across Europe. Applause, flashes. Clara took the microphone. Everyone fell silent. Thank you for the invitation, but I came here not to give a speech, but to tell the truth. Murmurs. Cesar's face paled. Clara, what are you doing? he whispered. She ignored him. For years, my name was used in international frauds. Donations that never reached orphans, companies that never existed, accounts in my name that I never opened. The room froze. She held up a folder. Here are the documents, digital signatures, witnesses, voice recordings, including one from my mother, who died under mysterious circumstances. Security guards approached, but Raphael stepped in front. Don't touch her. Helena handed a flash drive to the press. This is for you. Investigate, and you'll see. Caesar tried to speak. It's all lies. She's confused. My daughter would never... I'm not your daughter, Clara interrupted. I'm Elisa's daughter, the woman you silenced. And I'm here today because her voice never died. It was buried, but not broken. The gala turned into chaos. Phones recording everything. Swiss police entered minutes later. Mr. Cesar Toledo, the officer said, you are under arrest for international money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. Handcuffs clicked. And for the first time in his life, Cesar couldn't smile. Clara looked him in the eye. You stole my childhood, my name, my peace, but now I'm taking it all back. He lowered his head, and the press crowned her not as a victim, but as a survivor. 2 days after Cesar's arrest, Clara sat in front of the largest television audience in Europe. The studio was silent. The journalist, known for being incisive and merciless with powerful figures, adjusted her notes and looked at Clara with a curious expression. Why did you decide to speak now? She asked. Clara took a deep breath. Because silence was no longer an option, and because I found my mother's voice again. The interviewer raised an eyebrow. Your mother died when you were just a child, correct? Yes, but her voice survived in an audio, and in the memory of people who were brave enough to tell me the truth. Clips of Cesar being led in handcuffs, of the gala turning into scandal, and of Clara standing at the microphone were projected on a giant screen. The journalist asked, some say you're trying to clean your name. Others think you're simply seeking revenge. Which is it? Clara smiled softly. I didn't come for revenge. I came for justice. But if justice feels like revenge to those who did wrong, maybe that's a sign they never understood what love truly is. The host paused for a moment, then asked, do you feel sorry for your father? Clara hesitated. Her heart answered before her mind could formulate an official answer. No, I feel sorry for the man he could have been, for the father I never had. There was silence in the studio, and then applause, spontaneous. From the production team, from the camera operators, from the guests behind the scenes, because Clara Toledo, the girl raised in luxury and lies, had chosen the truth. And truth has power, more than gold, more than titles, more than any empire built on silence. Chapter 11. The apartment by the lake. It was almost sunset when Clara returned to the small apartment by Lake Zurich. Raphael had gone out to buy bread and fruit, and the television was off. For the first time in weeks, silence felt peaceful. She stood by the window. Children played by the lake, running after geese. A couple held hands on a bench, and Clara thought about everything that had brought her there, the betrayals, the lies, the inheritance of pain she had carried in silence for so many years. She opened her mother's notebook again. Elisa had written poems, letters, dreams that never came true. And between 2 pages yellowed by time, Clara found a photo, her mother holding her as a baby, both smiling, barefoot in the garden of a small house. It wasn't wealth, it wasn't power, but it was love, and that was what had been stolen from her. Until now. She took a pen and began to write. Mom, today I understood everything. I understand why you fought, why you feared, why you endured so much. And today I know that your legacy is not pain, but courage. I love you, and I will never let your story be forgotten. When Raphael returned, he saw her sitting on the floor, pen in hand, face serene. You're writing? He asked. Yes, Clara replied. A book. A book? She nodded. About everything, so no one else ever goes through what we went through. So other girls know that they can say no, they can investigate, They can demand the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Raphael sat beside her. And what will the title be? She thought for a second, smiled. The Daughter of the Silence. It was raining in Zurich when the letter arrived. Clara had just finished the first draft of her book and was making tea in the kitchen when Raphael handed her the envelope. "It has no return address," he warned. Clara opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten letter, male handwriting, a bit shaky. She recognized it before finishing the first paragraph. It was from Caesar. "Clara, I don't expect forgiveness. I wouldn't even know how to ask for it. But the silence of this cell has made me listen. Finally, I saw your interview, I saw your eyes, and I realized that everything I built was a prison. For me, for you, for your mother. I lied to survive, and in doing so I lost everything that made life worth it. I don't know how many years I'll have left, or if I'll ever be free again, but I wanted you to know that your truth freed me more than any lawyer ever could. I used to be proud of my name. Today I am proud of yours, César." Clara read the letter in silence, and for the first time she cried not for pain, but for release. Raphael knelt beside her. "What did he say?" She handed him the letter. "He didn't ask to be saved, only to be heard." The rain continued to fall gently, and in that moment Clara understood. The real justice wasn't only putting him in jail, it was breaking the curse, ending the cycle, choosing not to hate, letting the wound breathe, so it could at last heal. Weeks later, Clara returned to Brazil for the first time since the scandal broke. Cameras waited at the airport, but she passed by quietly. No makeup, no press release, no speeches, only a single destination. The house where Elisa had grown up, in the countryside of Minas Gerais. It was abandoned, but the land still breathed. There was an old garden behind the house, dry, forgotten. Clara took off her shoes, walked barefoot, and began pulling weeds. She cleaned the earth, planted flowers, watered the soil, and when the sun began to set, she sat on the porch and felt her mother's presence stronger than ever. A neighbor approached. An elderly woman. "Are you Elisa's daughter?" Clara smiled. "Yes." The woman took her hand. "She was the bravest woman I ever met. She left here to seek justice in a world that didn't want to hear women, but she was light. And now, you are too." Clara's eyes filled with tears. They sat in silence as the sky turned orange, and Clara knew it was not the end of the story. It was a new beginning. She would return to Switzerland. She would publish her book. She would speak in schools, forums, institutions, and above all, she would build a scholarship fund in her mother's name. Elisa Institute, for girls who were never heard, because silence, when transformed by love, becomes a seed, and Clara would make it bloom. Everywhere. 3 years passed. The story of Clara Toledo, daughter of power, survivor of silence, voice of memory, had crossed borders. Her book had been translated into 12 languages. Her TED Talk reached millions. But what touched her the most was a letter from a girl in Mozambique. "Miss Clara, my uncle said girls don't study, but I saw your video in the school's computer lab. You spoke about your mother and your truth. I didn't know women could speak like that. I want to be like you. I've written my first story. It's about my grandmother, who raised me after my mother died. I don't know if it's good, but it's real." The girl signed, Esperanza, hope. Clara printed the letter and framed it in her office. She looked at it every morning before starting work. Because in that fragile handwriting, born from a distant corner of the world, she found her mission. She traveled to communities, gave talks in forgotten neighborhoods, sat beside girls who had never seen a woman in a suit cry and say, "I was once like you," and in each of those places she planted something. Sometimes it was a book, sometimes a seed, sometimes just a gaze, but always a possibility. She knew she couldn't undo the past, but she could change its future echo. The day the Elisa Institute opened its doors in Brazil, Clara stood at the entrance with trembling hands. Raphael held her gently, and her eyes scanned the girls arriving, in uniforms holding notebooks, some with tears, others with uncertain smiles. There were more than 200. They came from orphanages, favelas, shelters, and also from good homes where they had never been heard. The walls of the institute were painted with phrases her mother had written in her notebook. Don't be ashamed to cry. The truth doesn't kill, it frees. You don't need to scream to be strong, but don't stay silent out of fear. That night, as the sun set, Clara walked alone through the corridors of the place that now carried her mother's name. She stopped in front of a small recording room, pressed play on a panel, and a voice filled the space. It was Elisa's voice, recorded on an old cassette Raphael had helped restore. If you're hearing this, it's because my voice made it through the years. My name is Elisa. I was silenced once. But I believe that words, like seeds, find soil in time. And if this reached you, don't give up. There's still so much to build. Clara closed her eyes and smiled, because Elisa had spoken again, because silence had finally bloomed, and because from the ruins of a lie, she had built a legacy, one that would echo for generations, forever.